The great alien city was alive with noise and light. Tall towers of silver rose into the sky, glowing with strange symbols. Crowds filled the central plaza, waiting for the daily meal. At the center, long tables stretched, filled with steaming food, sweet fruits, and golden drinks. But one place remained empty. A small girl named Lyra stood apart from the others. Her hair was tangled, her clothes were plain, and her eyes stared at the ground. She was not allowed to sit with the rest. The elders had ordered her to eat outside the walls, far from the table of the pure. The crowd whispered and laughed. To them, she was a stain on their honor. Her heritage was dirty, a reminder of bloodlines they despised. And so, every day, she was pushed away, forced to sit alone in the dust, while others feasted together. Lyra held her plate with shaking hands. Her stomach cried for food, but the shame was heavier than her hunger. Children nearby mocked her, throwing crumbs into the dirt. Their laughter echoed like cruel music. She tried not to cry, but her lips trembled as she knelt on the cold ground. Around her, no one defended her. The elders watched in silence. The guards turned their eyes away. For them, this was tradition. It had been done for generations, and to them it was justice. But the air felt heavy, charged with something different. Among the crowd, unseen, a pair of human eyes watched closely. A man, a traveler, stood at the edge of the plaza. His jaw tightened as he saw the cruelty unfold. His fists clenched at his sides. He had been told to respect their customs. But in his chest, anger burned hotter with every second. And Lyra, the little outcast, lowered her head, believing she was alone, not knowing that her world was about to change, because someone, for the first time, would dare to defy them. Lyra sat on the ground, her small frame bent forward as if the weight of the world pressed down on her shoulders. The food on her plate was still untouched. She could not lift it. Around her, the plaza was alive with laughter, the sound of spoons striking plates, voices rising in cheer. For everyone else, it was a moment of joy. For her, it was another reminder that she did not belong. The dust clung to her knees. The wind carried the smell of roasted meat, sweet bread, and rich spices. But none of it felt like it was meant for her. Every bite she tried to take would be another humiliation, another proof that she was less than the rest. Children, emboldened by the silence of the elders, stepped closer. One boy threw a crust of bread at her feet, smirking as if it were a grand joke. Another whispered loudly, "Dirty blood, unclean spirit." The words cut deeper than any blade. Lyra's fingers tightened around her plate, but she stayed silent. She had learned long ago that speaking back only made things worse. Her stomach growled, loud enough for those near her to hear. They laughed harder. Tears threatened to escape, but she blinked them away. She had promised herself she would not let them see her cry. Not today, not again. The elders, standing like tall shadows, watched with cold eyes. They did not laugh, but their silence was worse than cruelty. Their approval of this ritual kept it alive. To them, she was not a child but a punishment, a living reminder of a bloodline they wished erased. Lyra took one small bite, her hands trembling. The food felt like stone in her mouth. She chewed slowly, each movement heavy with shame. Her heart pounded as the crowd's whispers grew louder, the sound crawling into her ears, into her soul. And yet, something in her chest refused to break. Deep inside, beneath the pain and humiliation, a small spark of defiance flickered. A desperate wish that someone, anyone, would see her not as a curse but as a child who wanted to live, to belong. What she did not know was that a stranger's gaze had already locked on her. A man not of her people, not bound by their cruel rules. His eyes burned with fury, his steps heavy with decision. And in the silence of her suffering, destiny was already moving closer. Far from the noisy tables, near the shadow of a stone pillar, a man stood quietly. His name was Marcus, a human traveler who had come to the alien city for trade. He was dressed in plain clothes, carrying nothing more than a leather satchel and the dust of long journeys on his boots. To the crowd, he was just another outsider, unimportant and forgettable. But his eyes were sharp, burning, alive. Marcus had seen many cultures in his travels. He had witnessed strange customs and unusual traditions. Yet nothing he had ever encountered struck him as cruel as what he saw now. A little girl, shivering on the ground, mocked for the blood that flowed in her veins, forced to eat like an animal while those around her feasted as if nothing was wrong. He clenched his fists at his sides. His jaw tightened until it ached. Every laugh that echoed across the plaza felt like a knife cutting into him. Every silent nod of approval from the elders made his chest burn hotter. The merchants beside him whispered. One of them, an old alien trader, leaned closer and said in a low tone, "Do not interfere, human. This is their way, their law. Step into it and you invite death." Marcus did not answer. His gaze never left the girl. He watched as children circled her like hunters around prey. He watched as her thin hands trembled, as she fought not to cry. Something inside him, something deep and unshakable, refused to let him turn away. He had not come here to start a fight. He had promised himself he would respect the customs of those he visited. But what he saw was not a custom, it was cruelty. Cruelty so naked and raw that it screamed for defiance. The crowd did not notice him yet. To them, he was invisible. But his heart thundered, his body tense like a bowstring ready to snap. He knew in that moment he stood at a line. On one side was silence, safety, and the easy path of ignoring injustice. On the other side was defiance, danger, outrage, maybe even death. And yet, Marcus already knew his choice. His boots shifted on the stone. His body leaned forward. The spark of resistance that had lived in him for years began to blaze. He did not care if the entire city turned against him. He would not let a child suffer alone. Unseen by the crowd, the human's first step echoed like a drumbeat of destiny. And for the first time in her life, Lyra was not as alone as she believed. The plaza was alive with laughter and chatter, but it all seemed to fall silent the moment Marcus moved. His boots struck the stone floor with steady, deliberate steps. The sound cut through the noise like a warning drum. Heads began to turn. The human, an outsider, was walking straight toward the girl. Whispers spread through the crowd like wildfire. "What is he doing? He dares. Surely he knows this is forbidden." The alien elders leaned forward, their faces tightening with anger. Guards shifted uneasily, their hands brushing against the hilts of their weapons. Lyra, lost in her shame, did not notice at first. Her eyes stayed on the dust. Her small body bent as she forced another painful bite into her mouth. But the plaza's murmurs grew louder. A hush spread, and finally she looked up. Her breath caught in her throat. Marcus was standing before her, tall and unyielding, his shadow falling over her fragile frame. For a moment, she thought he would mock her too, or demand she move. That was what always happened. No one had ever stood by her side before. But Marcus did not turn away. He lowered himself slowly, deliberately, and sat on the cold ground beside her. The alien crowd gasped as one. It was as if the very air had been ripped apart. Without a word, Marcus placed his plate in front of her. He picked up a piece of bread, broke it in half, and held it toward the trembling child. His eyes met hers, firm, steady, filled not with pity but with a simple truth. "You are not alone anymore." Lyra froze, her lips parting in disbelief. Her hands shook as she reached out, almost afraid the food would vanish. No one had ever dared share a meal with her, not once in her short life. And now, here was a stranger, a human, defying the very laws that bound her in chains. The elders erupted. Their voices thundered across the plaza. "This is forbidden. This is sacrilege. Remove him at once." The guards hesitated. They had never seen such a thing. Their spears hovered in the air, but none dared move first. The crowd's voices clashed in chaos. Some shouted for punishment, others whispered in awe. But Marcus did not move. His posture was calm, unbroken. He tore another piece of bread and ate it himself, right there beside the girl. His defiance was not loud or violent. It was quiet, steady, unshakable, and far more powerful. For the first time, the tradition had been broken. And for the first time, Lyra tasted food without shame. The silence of shock did not last long. A roar swept through the plaza like a wave crashing against stone. The elders stood, their long robes flowing like dark fire. Their voices rose together, deep and commanding, shaking the air. "This is forbidden," one bellowed. "He dares corrupt our laws," shouted another. "Guards, seize him at once." The crowd erupted in chaos. Some shouted with fury, their faces twisted in rage. Others gasped in awe, unable to believe what they were witnessing. Parents pulled their children closer, as if Marcus were a danger, not a savior. Still others whispered to one another, doubt creeping into their voices. The guards stepped forward, spears raised. Their eyes flicked nervously between the human and the elders. Yet hesitation froze their feet. They had seen Marcus do nothing violent. All he had done was sit. All he had done was share bread with a child. And somehow that single act felt heavier than 1,000 battles. Marcus did not rise. He sat calmly beside Lyra, his back straight, his eyes locked on the elders with quiet defiance. He broke another piece of bread and placed it gently in the girl's small hand. His silence spoke louder than their screams. Lyra, trembling, lifted the bread to her lips. For the first time in her life, she ate without hiding, without shame. The crowd fell into a hush again, as if they were watching the impossible. But the elders were furious. Their voices shook with venom. "This human insults us. He mocks our honor. Remove him, or tradition itself will burn." The younger aliens in the crowd began to murmur. "Why is it shameful?" one whispered. "She is just a child." Another muttered, "Perhaps the human is right. Perhaps our law is wrong." The elders heard these whispers, and their anger grew even darker. Tradition had survived for centuries, but now a single human's quiet act was planting doubt in the hearts of their people. The guards raised their spears higher. The air was thick with tension, as if violence could break out at any second. But Marcus did not flinch. His calm presence was like an unmovable mountain. His eyes burned with fire, but his hands were steady, his voice silent. And that silence was more dangerous than any weapon. The ritual had been shattered. The law had been challenged. And for the first time, the city itself began to tremble under the weight of a human's defiance. The plaza had turned into a storm of voices. The elders shouted commands, the guards gripped their spears, and the crowd swayed between fear and disbelief. Yet in the middle of all the chaos, Marcus and Lyra sat in silence. The human did not shout. He did not argue. He simply shared bread with the child, his every action slow and steady, as if daring anyone to stop him. His silence carried more weight than 1,000 words. Lyra's hands still trembled, but she no longer hid her face. For the first time in her short life, she sat upright. For the first time, she ate openly, in front of everyone, without shame. The taste of bread was simple, yet to her it felt like freedom. The guards inched closer, their spears raised, but doubt flickered in their eyes. One of them whispered to another, "He has broken no law of violence. He only sits. He only eats." The other guard hesitated, his hands unsteady. Even the enforcers of tradition were unsure. The crowd began to split. Some shouted for punishment. "Remove him. End this insult." Others, younger voices, spoke with hesitation. "Why should she suffer? Why must a child be humiliated for her blood?" Their words spread like sparks in dry grass, igniting questions that had long been buried. The elders grew more furious. Their faces turned red with rage, their voices sharp as knives. "If you do not act now," they thundered at the guards, "our entire order will collapse." But Marcus did not move. He placed his hand gently on Lyra's shoulder, steadying her shaking frame. His gaze met the eyes of the crowd, not with anger, but with unshakable resolve. One man against an entire city. One act against centuries of cruelty. Lyra's eyes filled with tears, but not from shame. These were tears of something she had never felt before. Hope, she whispered softly, almost too faint to hear. Thank you. The words struck harder than any blade. The crowd fell silent again. Even the wind seemed to pause. It was then that many realized the truth. Tradition had not kept them strong. It had kept them blind. And now one human's courage had opened their eyes. The plaza trembled, not with violence, but with the first cracks of change. Night fell over the alien city, but the echoes of what had happened in the plaza did not fade. The story spread faster than fire. From market stalls to hidden alleys, from young apprentices to seasoned traders, everyone whispered about the human who had defied the elders. One act, one moment, had shattered the silence of centuries. The elders locked themselves in their chambers, furious and afraid. They had shouted for Marcus to be punished, yet the guards had hesitated. The people had begun to question, and questions were far more dangerous than swords. Lyra walked home that night with her head held a little higher. Her stomach was full, but more than that, her heart carried something she had never known. Hope. She replayed the moment in her mind. The human sitting beside her, the bread shared without fear, the calm fire in his eyes. For the first time, she dared to believe she was not cursed. She was not dirty. She was simply a child. Marcus, too, left the plaza in silence. He knew the elders hated him now. He knew the city might rise against him. But he also knew the seed had been planted. A seed of defiance. A seed of change. One child had been seen, truly seen, and that truth could not be buried again. Across the stars, the story traveled. Travelers carried it to distant colonies, to stations orbiting suns, to ships sailing the dark void. The tale grew in every telling. A human stood against an empire's cruelty. A human shared bread with the outcast. And with every retelling, the message deepened. Tradition can break. Injustice can fall. And even in the darkest silence, the courage of one can spark the hope of many. That night, the galaxy learned what the plaza had witnessed. Sometimes, it takes only one human to change the destiny of worlds.